Hi, everyone. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here as a part of our journey through navigating parenting together. Thank you for taking the time to invest in yourself and your relationship with your children. Today, we are going to talk about transitions. Interestingly enough, at this point right now, my family and I have just moved cross country. And so our whole family is transitioning in a to a completely different reality and life, a different city, a different home, a different state. My kids are in a different camp and they will be going to a different school. We have all different new people around us. And there are just so many wonderful things about moving and change, but there's also a lot that transitions can bring with it that can be unsettling and uncomfortable. And there are all sorts of transitions that we go through in our lives, right? Children have transitions to starting school, to starting a new school, right? Switching schools, going to camp, day camp, sleepaway camp, having a babysitter, having a new babysitter, a nanny, having a new child added to the family, right? Perhaps a divorce, perhaps a new marriage in the family. Other transitions, like transitioning from one swimming instructor to a different swimming instructor, or a certain dance class to another dance class, or one hobby to a different hobby because that hobby doesn't work for us anymore. We go through transitions and we go through changes all the time. And there are bigger changes and smaller changes. Some people cope better with changes. Some people, changes are a lot harder for them. But I want to use this time to help you set up yourselves and your children for success when we're going through different sorts of transitions, right? Transitioning to high school, to college. I just thought of, when children are young, transitioning to potty training, transitioning to a toddler bed, transitioning to a different sleep schedule. Transitions and changes are all around us. And so here are some key ideas to keep in mind when we want to transition consciously. We want to transition smoothly. And I say that with a little bit of hesitation because we can set ourselves up for success and it might still not be completely smooth because transitions are bumpy. It's just normal. It's part of it. But guess what? That's okay, right? Because that's what transitions are. There's always going to be a beforehand, which can be nerve-wracking or intimidating or scary or unknown. The middle, which is like when we're going through it, which is also bumpy in its own way. And then afterwards, right? The landing into it, the calm after the storm, the being equipped and a part of a different reality than we were before. So it's always going to be a process. And when I say this, and it's important because one of the most important things for us as parents and what we want our children to understand is that we can set ourselves up for success. We can make it a lot easier for ourselves, but it doesn't mean it's going to be perfect. And if there are still bumps, then that's okay. It's a part of life and it's really normal. So what are the things that we can do when we're about to go through a transition within our family? And how can we set our children up for that success? So there are a few important key concepts that I'm going to go over. And again, if I miss anything or you have additional questions after you hear this recording, please send me an email or send my team an email. I would love to hear what you have to say. First of all, you may know something that I don't. You may have some ideas. And if you have questions, please let me know because I'd love to address them in our monthly Q&A or in another class in the future. So here they are. Let's jump into it. The first and foremost thing that I really believe is so important when we are transitioning our children in any way is to include them in the transition as much as possible. Nobody likes a big life change to just be sprung on them, to be told this is what's happening and you have no choice in the matter. So even if technically your children don't have much of a choice, like you're moving, there's no choice. You still have the ability to explain it to your children or to include them in the decision so that they feel included, they feel a part, they feel like it's not something that's being done to them, but actually they're a part of it. So for example, when we were making our cross-country move, we didn't sit down with the kids and say, we've decided that we're going to move and make it this big scary thing, because that if it's in like one foul swoop, it's like a big shift. It's I think scary and intimidating and a lot to be taken in. But we included our children along the way of what our thoughts were. Once we were pretty sure we were moving, but let's say we didn't have the date yet, right? And we didn't know all the details. We just started to let them know that this is something that's probably going to come up. This is something that we're starting to think about, talking about what that looks like. What does that mean? Who are we going to see there? And just including them in as many of the details as we can. Now, like I said, it's not that your children will necessarily actually be a part of the decision, but you want them to feel that they're included in it, right? You don't want to sit down and tell them, okay, we're moving, and they had like no preparation, and then suddenly it's just like this bomb is dropped. Or you're switching schools, it's a bomb dropping. As there start to be things that come up that aren't working for you where you were previously, mention them, notice them, talk to your children about them, see what they think about them. So include them so that they have this idea that, there are things, again, that aren't working, or there are things that could be better somewhere else, or, a new baby is coming. And it's not because we're not happy where we are, but we're just so excited to add someone to the home, right? Start slow and build up gradually so that your children feel included and part of it, rather than just dropping something on them, which really makes them feel like, oh my God, I have no choice and no say in the matter. And nobody likes to feel like that. Nobody. So include your children, make them a part of the decision and the process. Give them as many details as possible. Some children don't like a lot of details. For example, when my daughter was starting camp here, I wanted to talk to her about it and let her know how the day was going to go. But it was so, I think, scary and overwhelming and nerve-wracking for her to be starting a new camp. She's like, she didn't want any details beforehand because she really didn't, she just didn't want to hear about it. And I respected that. But for the most part, children do want to know what's coming and what's going to happen. And so you just want to give them as many details as you can, right? Like when it came to the actual move, it was A to Z. We're going to pack up our house. There are going to be boxes. There's going to be luggage. There are going to be some days where we're, not going to be sleeping with all of our things in our bedrooms. When are the beds going to be moved out? How are we getting to the airport? How are we moving? When will all our boxes arrive? Where are we going as soon as we land? Like as many details as possible. What are we going to pack in our bags? What are we going to do on the airplane? What is the car ride going to look like, right? Give them as many details as possible. Now, I mentioned that, for example, my daughter didn't want to hear lots of details about camp because it was scary for her. I did still let her know that she was going to camp. I did continue asking her here and there, can I share with you some details? And she would say no, so then I wouldn't. But she did have some idea of what was coming because she knew she was going to camp. She knew what kind of camp it was, right? So for the most part, and usually children want to be included, and it's really helpful for them to be able to have a picture of what's coming. So for older children, maybe write it out in a story. For younger children, color it, read them books about the transition or the feelings that they're having around the transition, around the move, around the shift, whatever that might be. If they're older, allow them to read their own books and to write about it themselves, and to find out about people in their lives who maybe have gone through the same kinds of things, right? To create and show them the process and talk about it as much as you possibly can, right? You may be making lots of plans for your transition. You may be allowing yourself to just flow through it. Some parents are like that too, right? Like, we're going to move and we kind of know where we're moving, but we don't know all the details yet, or we don't have the furniture yet, or whatever that transition might be like. We don't know all the details yet. That's okay. Just let them know what the plan is or what the lack of plan is, right? Let them feel and feel included as much as possible. Now, before the transition, during the transition, and after the transition, there will be lots and lots and lots of feelings that will come up. Now, as a parent, many times we think we know what our child is going to feel. Sometimes we do know what our child is going to feel. But even so, we want to be really careful not to project our feelings onto them. So that can be our own feelings, our own anxieties and worries and questions and wonders or whatever we're feeling. But we also don't want to project for them what we think they're going to feel, because we want to give them the space to feel what they feel. And perhaps we might think, oh, this is going to be a really hard transition for them, but actually it's not really that hard. And if we had just let them go through it without projecting, oh, you're probably going to feel really nervous, you're probably going to get angry, you're probably going to miss this person, we're planting those thoughts in their head, right? And they may not have ever even felt those if we hadn't given them to them already. In addition, right, what we're doing is we're telling them this is how you're supposed to feel. So then if they don't feel like that, they're going to be confused. But also, right, then we're not giving them the space to just feel their feelings. So beforehand, we can ask them, how do you feel when you hear that? How are you feeling right now in this moment? Right? Or I imagine you might feel these ways, but you might not too. And I really want to know what it is that you're feeling. And I want, you to feel like you can be safe and comfortable to share with me what you're going through. Now, when your children have those big feelings, you don't need to solve them. They're moving away from a school that they've gone to for many years of their lives. You don't need to, they're going to miss their friends. They're going to miss the safety and security of that school. And that's okay, right? What we want to do as parents is create a space for our children to just express and talk about how they feel. We don't need to have an answer. We don't need to solve it. We don't need to fix it. We don't need to make it better. We don't need to make it better. We need to give them the space to feel it. Now, what comes with feeling feelings is not, many times it's not going to be a child just saying, I'm feeling really sad right now. Eventually we want to get there, right? We want our children to know how to recognize and learn how to articulate their feelings. But before they get to that space, it's going to be more like a lot of, there can be aggression, there can be anger, there can be crying, there can be, children really pushing boundaries, right? A lot of defiance, a lot of actions that were just not there before. And many of us wouldn't say, oh yes, we know that, it's just it's a result of the move, or it's a result of this big shift. So if we didn't know that already, then that's how our children are expressing their feelings. So if there is behavior that is different than the way that they've behaved in the past, and kind of that you feel is unacceptable to you, remember that this is the way your children are expressing their feelings. And so we don't want to shut it down. We don't want to be in these moments really hard on them. We don't want to tell them to stop. We want to give them the space to have that behavior. Later on in a calm moment, we can always address it. We can always go back to what are our values in our home, which is really, really important. But remembering that behavior is the same thing as a child saying, I'm sad, I'm angry, I'm frustrated, I'm lonely, I'm nervous, I'm worried, I'm depressed, I'm I don't know what else, happy. Behavior is an expression of those feelings. So it's not just like, I'm really scared about going to this new place, or I really don't want to have a new child added to our family, or, moving out of the house for the first time is making me feel really anxious. Sometimes our children will be able to express and communicate that to us, but sometimes they won't. And sometimes their behavior is doing that. So we want to create that space where we allow for all of those feelings, for that behavior, right? With a lot of forgiveness and compassion and empathy. Knowing that at the soul of our child, they're perfect, they're amazing, they're wonderful, they're not trying to hurt by any means, right? So how can we allow them to express in that way? Now, when we move on to another stage of our life, before we move on, we're closing the door to wherever we were before, to being the only child in the family. We're moving out of a home. We want to create closure, okay? We want to help our children have closure. That can come in a lot of different ways. Closure is something that's really awkward and uncomfortable for a lot of people. People don't like saying goodbye. It feels very weird, and just like it, because I think mostly it's because we don't like to feel our feelings and sit with them and expose and be vulnerable in that way, which I really understand, because it's not something that's like so easy for many of us to do. However, closure provides us and our children with the ability to create a solid foundation to move on to our next stage, into our next chapter. When we don't have closure, we actually kind of leave loose ends up in the air. You know, energetically, there isn't anything that's like shutting the door. We're just like starting off something new without having built that foundation for ourselves on which we can build and we can create and we can move on to the next stage. So closure of an era is really, really important. So what does that look like? That can look like so many different things. When you're moving out of a house, say goodbye to the house, right? Appreciate and think about the different memories that you've had there. That can make you feel really sad, and that's okay. Go into the sadness, go into the feelings. If it's too much, it's too much, but you do it as much as you can. Right? When you're switching schools, you say goodbye to the school, you say goodbye to the teachers, you say thank you to the staff members and the children. When it's hard to move, when it's hard to transition and you just kind of want to avoid it, what ends up happening is it's easier in the moment, but at the end of the day, you just feel weird about the part that you left behind and you don't feel like you said goodbye to it. It's a part of you. Wherever you're coming from is a part of you, right? And you want to bundle it, right? To create like a separation between it and the next thing. And again, they all kind of go into one, but it's really, really important for children and adults alike to have closure. So that's really, really important. Now, when our children are moving into something else, we want to try, another great tip is to try to keep as much familiar as possible. So for example, in our luggage, which we took on the airplane, I packed like the same bed sheets that my kids sleep in at home, right? Their favorite stuffed animals. We stayed with my mother-in-law for a while, but everyone had like the same kind of sleeping arrangements that they had at the last house. Keep as much, meaning like my two oldest slept together in a bed, my youngest had her own space. Keep as much familiar as possible, okay, as best as you can. You know, whether that's like, what do you usually eat for breakfast? Try to make sure that you get that. Like whatever is an important part of you and your family's routine, try to keep that within the next stage. If your child is moving to a new school, you know, maybe they can get to school the same way that they used to. If it's the same parent dropping them off, can they bring the same backpack with them? Is there a notebook that was familiar to them from the last school that they can continue to take with them? Make sure that your children have things around them that will make them feel safe and secure in an unknown environment. So make sure that it's not like everything is completely brand new. You want them to feel like they're bringing a part of themselves into the next stage, you know, things that are familiar, as much as you possibly can. You're adding a new child to the house. The schedule is going to change. Everything's going to change. But what can you make sure to really keep the same for the children that have already been there? So they feel like, you know, they feel that they know a part of this deeply unknown next step that they're switching into within their lives. Remember that there will always be an adjustment time. There will always be an adjustment time. And this adjustment time is something that I think as parents, we have to be really patient with for ourselves and our children, giving our children time to adjust, but also remembering that it's so easy to create a space and to set our children up for success to adjust, right? Like taking care of all of those things that I just mentioned for our children. But what about for yourself? Give yourself that adjustment time too, because even though you're the one planning it and you're the one who knows what's coming, you're still going into a new environment. There's going to be so many new feelings for you. There's going to be so many new things to adjust to, right? There's going to be extra stress and extra pressure to get everything set up. Plus, you're the one who everyone is going to be leaning on for that security and that stability. So you want as a parent to be really, really mindful of creating a space for your own adjustment, allowing yourself to feel all your feelings, bringing things that will help you to feel safe and secure and taken care of. We get so focused on our children, which is amazing and important, and I honor that, right? We also just can't forget about ourselves. It's so important to make sure that we feel safe and secure wherever it is that we're going. You know, I have a drink that I drink every morning. I drink mud water instead of coffee. And so I packed in my luggage, my mud water, my special thing that I use to like stir it because it's a powder. You didn't need to know that. And a specific cup that I like to drink it from. I packed that in my luggage. Did I need to? No. Could I have figured out other solutions? Yes. But for me, it gives me a sense of normalcy. It gives me a sense of familiarity. I did not say that word right. It helps me to, adjust in a gentler, safe way into like this new environment where I'm not going to have all the food that I'm used to having. I'm not going to have, everything that is familiar to me. And so I wanted to make sure that, I did have certain things that are familiar to me, that would come with me. So just as an adult, as a parent, we want to make sure that we are checking our own feelings, that we're checking that we are creating a space where we can adjust, where we can feel safe going into this new environment and within this new transition. We have a plan. And if you're a really structured person, you might need things mapped out A to Z. If you're not a structured person and you like to go with the flow, that's cool too. And I think it's worth mentioning that if you are someone like that, and a lot of these things, you don't like to plan, you don't like to create a big thing about transitions and changes, that's okay. Do it in your own way, okay? Do it in your own way and be mindful that you might have a child that needs all of that plan. And so even if you're someone that likes to flow and you have a child that likes a big plan, or vice versa, you like to plan and your child really doesn't want to know the details, they just want to flow, we want to be mindful and respectful of that and integrating any of what I just shared into the transition so that we can make it as easy and smooth for everyone as possible. So I hope this was helpful. Transitions, changes are not always easy, but they're really exciting too. And by the way, just because they're exciting doesn't mean that they're not easy. Just because they're somewhere you want to go and transition to doesn't mean that there might be feelings that will still come up of longing for what was and what you had and right beforehand. So it's okay to have those conflicting feelings. It's okay to have, feel yourself pulled in different directions. It's all good. Wherever you are, it's all good. I wish you a lot of luck, a lot of success. I hope this is helpful and applicable to you in all different transitional periods in your life. Again, please email me your questions, email me your topic ideas. We are in this parenting journey together. Have a wonderful day, and I'll talk to you soon.